good afternoon, everyone. So you already had, I'm not sure how many of y'all who attended, or who is attending right now, attended last week's talk by Renita, who she gave a little bit of insight into how to do literature search and so forth. And she will actually have an hands-on activity. She sent the worksheets and stuff to you guys by email. I think Nadia forwarded it to you guys. So you can use that. In fact, I suggest during my talk and post my talk, you should start filling that sheet up, matching to your topic of interest, because then that way it'll be more useful by the time you actually attend her workshop. You will be able to even ask her questions or even troubleshoot your inclusion and exclusion criteria for searching online and so forth. So it's more useful rather than just keeping it empty and waiting for instructions on the day of her talk. I believe start filling things up. Even if it's incorrect, no harm. Just fill up what you think you know. All right. Now moving on to why is this two talks separated? Because literature review generally is search of the of what is out there. Okay, so it's a broad search. You will have a broad topic. So if you see over here, it's a broad topic. You'll have a topic in mind, and you can even go onto Google, not even Google Scholar, just go into Google and you just put in the word and everything will come up. Books, everything, which is not a problem. Books are also good point of references. But the point there's no structure to it. It's totally at random. And when you end up actually reading it, it's more of a quality assessment on your reading. You kind of taking the knowledge in, but you may not always critically look at the information because you're just reading what is written in the book, in published papers and so forth. And hence there will be bias because you'll make opinions based. Yeah, so we are based on there'll be biased opinions. Okay. So it doesn't, and you might miss out on certain papers, crucial key papers when you search randomly like that. Hence, a better approach is actually doing it systematically, hence the word systematic review, because it's more structured. You will then align it with a specific question, and hence that's why the talk by Prof. Byron, which was given, it's not only useful for your actual project, it's also useful when you're searching for material. And keep in mind, this talk may be trying to address chapter 2 for the GS students, or if there's any neurosurgery trainees here, apparently I was told that you can actually do this as your published paper, that if you do a systematic review with meta-analysis, it's original work, you can actually publish that and they will accept that for you to go for your FRCS exams. I'm not sure whether you guys are here, but apparently, yes, they will accept it because it's a published paper and they will accept it for you to go to exams. So it is important that this talk is not only covering what you need to know for your chapter 2 in terms of your thesis program and so forth. But when you search this is also useful when you are studying for exams. It is also useful when you're trying to practice, get structured information for your Viva boots and so forth. So it's a good way to practice to get information which is correct, okay? And rather than reading things at random. So that's why Renita's talk kind of touched a little bit on keywords and so forth, but I believe that the hands-on listing keywords she will do with you in the next lecture. I'm also not going to do so much of that. I might at the end try and get you to do a little bit of activity, which is to list your keywords, but I won't follow it through because I'll let her follow that through. So, but it is very important for you to then be clear with your inclusion and exclusion criteria. Now, inclusion and exclusion criteria, as you know, for your own study design, you have inclusion and exclusion criteria. But even when you're searching, you need to be clear with what your inclusion and exclusion criteria is. Sometimes you don't want to have too many inclusion criteria when you're searching for literature review. Yes, it's important. It is there for your methodology, for your study, which you're conducting, but it is something which you don't want to over restrict when you're doing a search for all the materials in your area out there. The reason being is you might accidentally miss out something which is a key paper in your topic of interest. So where you actually do more, list down more when you're doing these kind of searches, you have exclusion criteria later, because it's better to try and see all the papers out there and you at least see until the abstract, and then you decide that, okay, this is not, you don't need to look into the full paper of this, rather than accidentally missing out the paper. Now, coming to the meta-analysis. Now, why do we say systematic review and meta-analysis is, if it's at a published paper, it's acceptable. Well, for certain programs, I don't think the Euro trainees are allowed to do it, but neurosurgery trainees are. I'm not sure about PEDS, but having said that, it's because when you do it with a meta-analysis is a statistical tool, and that arm is actually considered original work. And in most journals, when you publish a systematic review with meta-analysis, with forest plots and so forth, because you're doing the statistical analysis, it's considered original article. I'll show you later what I mean. Compared to when it's a systematic review on its own, it's still a review. If it's a narrative review, it's still a review. So it ends up not considered original work because it's still considered you're summarizing and critically appraising other people's work. While meta-analysis, because you are now going to plug in numbers and you're going to come up with your own charts, it is considered original work. Okay, and that's why for neurosurgery, they're accepting it, but it's not the easiest thing to do, and hence it's not normally the first option they would recommend students to do. I'm not going to go into detail on all of this, but what I just want to show you, as much as people think review is just one thing, there's actually different kinds of reviews. So there's one which is scoping, which oversees, all of this can be done systematically and not systematically. You can do a scoping review, just randomly search things and then scope between that and conclude, but it'll be very flawed. But if you do it systematically, you can still search all the papers using all your keywords, your inclusion exclusion criteria, and you kind of just summarize the key points from what has been searched. That's the scoping review. So just to gauge what is out there in your area. Normally, this is when you do this, is probably when you're trying to decide whether your topic is novel enough, whether you should go ahead with it. Rapid review is not, it's more common when it's to do with policy. So like example, the guidelines, when they want to update guidelines. So you probably won't do so much of this yourself, but this is what is done when they have guidelines and they want to update guidelines. They'll rapidly review if there's any new evidence which have come up, and they will look at just recent papers to then improve policies and guidelines. Okay, narrative review, as it says, narrative is a storytelling. So it still searches everything, but it's more descriptive rather than involving stats. When it involves stats, then it's meta-analysis. And some papers can do both. They might have a narrative section, and then maybe they will have a section where they have statistically analyzed the data which has been collected. Now, just to give you quick examples, this, as you can see in the title itself, this says scoping reviews, a rapid review. So the management of the disease, so the guidelines, as I was mentioning. And then in terms of narrative review, this is an example. So they are basically looking. So as you can see, it is not something which is uncommon. So they actually put this in the title. So this is an example of one with meta-analysis. Again, it will be stated in the title. It's quite one of the requirements on the checklist. And this Byrne paper, actually, this is a paper I would like to highlight because this is one of your seniors. She did this as an extra project with me and a person in UK. And it's actually a mixed review. So she has meta-analysis in it, but it's mixed because it's a bit more narrative, with the one arm of it being analyzed with forest plots and so forth. Okay, so it is doable. So people do it as a thesis or part of the thesis. Okay, so I'm not going to go into this definition again. I kind of already touched these points in the previous slide, but basically the keywords are here. So you've kind of identified your papers, you then select and screen through it. You then come up with their themes out of those papers which you looked at, and then you critically appraise the content which you have gotten. Okay, why you do this? Because then you'll really truly know where the gap of knowledge is in your area of interest. You'll be able to bring a lot of studies into one place rather than just doing and also give you backup on why you need to do your study. And then if you do it with meta-analysis, you'll know the true effect of that particular result. Okay. Obviously, with this, before I touch funding, yes, it's time consuming. Okay, it takes up a lot of time, because obviously if you're going to search in databases and you're going to list down keywords and all of those things that you saw the worksheet, you got to fill that up. It can be time consuming, and then you spend time also trying to make sense of the data in each paper, and sometimes you might need to contact the original author if you need some of the data which is not clear. You might ask them for their raw data, and you need to ask for permission. And that's where the funding bit comes in, because sometimes you might need to pay to get full access of the paper, not to the author, but to the publishers and so forth. And so funding might be needed, and you might also need it if your project requires an RA, as well as funding in terms of post that some of the checklists and some of the softwares which need to do meta-analysis needs to be purchased in that cost as well. Okay, and it's best to always go for training. What I'm giving right now is more of a lecture, giving you an idea into what it's about. You're not actually getting training from me. You're getting a introduction to systematic review and why it's important, and a little bit on how to start. But there's proper full-on training, 3 days training for these kind of things. Okay, and Cochrane used to run it, but I think now it's expanded to other places which run the full training. Okay, so I'm going to try and skip things which has been covered in the other talks, but things which are not, I'm going to bring up here. Okay, so as I said, you need to know your topic. You then decide when are you searching. Are you going to, your timeline, this is similar to when you run your study retrospective. You decide that you want to go the last 10 years only, or the last 5 years only, because you want the most recent paper, or you don't have a timeline now until the beginning of the first study which came up in that area. So timeline, all right, of what you want to search. So that happens even with retrospective databases, right? And then you determine what are the resources you need, and do you need a checklist? Do you need to come up with a pro forma of what information you want to collect? The reason why I put co-author identity, it is important because in a lot of systematic reviews, besides yourself, you probably need a second person who reads reads the papers as the second reader and searches the things, because it's better 2 people search and 2 people go through the thing. Hence, that's probably why for GS, it's not suggested as for your thesis to do as part of your thesis, because it sometimes will need 2 people to do the searches and do the screening and so on all the steps. But having said that, there is a workaround to it if you're doing it with your supervisor, which probably rarely will happen. They're quite busy, right? But either way, you still need to list who are your working team, who are the authors who are going to do this with you, okay? And what everyone's role is. Okay, so these steps were covered a little bit by Renita already, because it's the same steps you would do when you want to do literature review. What's your question? As I mentioned this now, you come up with a protocol, which is kind of like a pro forma on like information you want to extract when you read the papers. You kind of got an example. She's kind of given you that worksheet, which is a little bit like a pro forma, but that's just a beginning step. Like the pro forma, you want it to be more specific to your topic. That's just an overall kind of set of checklists, okay? Then you start searching, you list your keywords and you have to search the review. You start screening the studies using your inclusion and exclusion criteria. You start extracting the information, and then you start appraising using checklists, as I'll show you the checklist soon, of each study according to the matching checklist. Then you start to put it into nice tables, and well, in this case, write paper or write up your literature review. Okay, I'm not going to cover this. You all know this. You've seen this many times across the last few talks, so you know this, right? I'll proceed to the next slide. Okay. So once you have actually know your study design and you know your population and all of those things, you can search using EndNote and put it into either EndNote and Excel, or you can search using PubMed and then transfer it into EndNote and Excel. But which search engines you want to use, you decide that as well in the beginning. Best, I normally use Excel to put all the data in. Some people might put it into Word documents, or if you feel there are other softwares which you are comfortable with, you can go ahead and use that. But I find Excel the best place to put the searches into. Okay. And note where I keep the reference for later when I'm writing, I need to then insert the references. Okay, so and then I start to read things which are not needed to be part of my search, and I will green things which is needed, and kind of put a yellow or like orange on ones which is a maybe. Okay, then so as I mentioned, that you can actually, just like how you do clinical trials, systematic reviews can, their protocols, if you have come up with your protocol very clearly, you can actually upload it. Used to be Cochrane, but there's now other, and it still has not been fully established yet, but I think you can now, this from this year. But in between, they started having one called Prospero, so you can actually enroll your systematic review protocol onto that. So in a way, that kind of stops other people from doing the systematic review, which you want to do. Okay. And then you start to remember, we already told you the outcome. So do you all remember what outcome is? Because the outcome is what are all the parameters, length of stay, from that paper which you're reading, what do you want to actually compare? And what are the things which you want to note down from each paper? Whether it is length of stay, whether it's survival data, whether it is logistic regression data, what data is it? What are you comparing, and what are needed to be extracted from each paper, so that you can build, as I told you, and then the concept of where what should be addressed in line to your topic. Okay, then you start to also group that paper research, papers which support what you are hypothesizing, and papers which are against your hypothesis. It is important to have both. You wouldn't exclude things which are not supporting you. It's important to have both, because that is where you build evidence that there is still a debate going on. Okay, and then you kind of weight each study, because how it's not just based on numbers, but obviously that's one of the things. Like obviously, if there's a study is done prospectively, and the numbers are already like 500, it has a higher weightage compared to a paper which is just 40 and it's retrospective, and all of that has a very small weightage towards the conclusion which you're trying to make. And obviously RCT. So the design, the level of the design, the level of how do I say, the number of patients, and obviously how well it was designed, the biasness which was involved in each of those studies, all of that may play as factors in giving weightage of the paper. Okay, and that's also part of you critically appraising a journal. When you are given something, those are the things which you question. What is the design of the study? What is the outcomes they looked at? What was the numbers they ended up having? Those are the questions you should be asking yourself to see whether their conclusion stands, or they still need to do more things, right? So when you look at just an individual paper. So, and then obviously you'll also look at the quality of paper, where it was published. Was it Lancet? Was it which kind of journal? Who are the publishers? Okay. Then in your data sheet, remember I told you have your own pro forma, which you should be practicing already when you are doing your own studies. You'll tell you to come up with your pro forma for your study, right? Similarly, you'll have a pro forma for your literature review, which is kind of that table which we get you all to put in the presentations to us. That's a summarized version, like a simplified version of this. So you kind of have your reference number or the author who wrote it. You can have the type of journal. When I say type of journal, whether it's a review, systematic review, whether it's a retrospective study, or whether it is prospective study, RCT, those kind of things. Or the type of journal, meaning the journal name. Okay, so study design can be whether it's cohort, whether it's comparing two groups, or whether it's one group, and so forth. And then number of samples, and where the population is from. Is it just one center or more than one center? All of that. And then the different outcome. I've put here outcomes, but you can break up the columns into different outcomes based on all the outcomes each paper looked at. You might expand or put things together based on, at the end, overall how many of the outcomes overlap. okay, or can we join together, okay? And then what did they actually find? That's normally found more in the conclusion, but sometimes the conclusions could be over conclude, they could over conclude. So it's better to look in the discussion and see what actually and the results to actually know whether they actually found relevant data and so forth. So, and then you make your own key short points from that paper. But you can look at the conclusion first and then work your way backwards. Remember I was mentioning about checklists. So as you can see, and this is not just useful for when you're doing systematic review, this is useful for your Viva books, for your exams, okay? Because if you actually know, so systematic review, the checklist is Prisma, but if you have other studies which are going on, the checklist is a consort diagram, and you can actually download these things if you go to this particular website. I'm not sure whether you can see it, so I'll go back 1 second. Just give me a sec. Right, okay. So there is checklist for different kinds of designs out there. As you can see, even if it's a economy evaluation, there's something called shares and so forth. I'm not going to go through and show you every single checklist here. This is something for you to take back and look through that website and start looking through it. And it's also important, whoever's doing a study which is going to be qualitative, go and look at the checklist and see whether you're already starting to comply to this checklist or not when you're designing your study, okay? And vice versa, depending on what your observational study, go and look at this checklist and see. And similarly, post that when you are given practicing for any exams, look at these checklists, because these are the kind of things which you should use as to support your when you're trying to appraise a journal, okay? Now, this is an example of my Excel. As you can see, it's very, I purposely did this. This is me in my in-between process of doing the search. Okay, and in fact, if you see my name is tagged here, that's because besides me, there was 3 other people who were doing the reading. So we divided to read the papers. So this was actually a live example of us working towards doing something, searching something systematically. We end up doing a narrative review though, not one with meta-analysis. But we still kind of put the reference there, we pasted it. We decided we wanted to know the definition. So because it's something which is under debate. Different people seem to define CMEs differently. So this is not the CME talk, this is the CME, which is under colorectal surgery. So we wanted to paste how each paper decided to define things. And if they didn't have anything, we kept it empty. If they did, we put it in. If the study design is not clear, we waited until we got clearer information and so forth. Or if the paper itself was not useful, I highlighted it to see whether we want to include it or not. Okay, and so forth. Then study design, the grouping and the numbers and so forth. I'm not showing the rest of it, but basically each column is separated according to what we want to extract from the each paper. Okay. Next is, okay, so I showed you, so when I say create a table, it's not that table is in Excel, it's still working, it's a working table. Actual table at the end is the one which you kind of use for your presentation, where it's already summarized. It doesn't have yellow here, and it's not just chunks of information. It's broken down to very short key points. So a very nice prepared table. And that's what I mean by table, ones which you see in published papers, okay? And then you consider whether you have enough data to do a forest plot, or whether you're going to end it with just a systematic review and then start making sense of the summarized data. Okay, and then you will start, if you're going to go with systematic review, start to analyze the data. You'll see how, and the reason why you forest plot is then it will also tell you whether all the papers are homogeneous or heterogeneous. But it doesn't make a big difference either way when it comes to meta-analysis, because when it's heterogeneous, it means it represents more of the population, but something to note down that it's representative of various population. If it's homogeneous, you'll say that it is all similar, and so what you're seeing is it's representing this group of patients or people or subjects. Well, that's it. Okay. And then okay, so running the meta-analysis, I'll get to the slides. I'm not sure whether it's the next slide yet. Okay, the other thing which you need to consider is limitations. As I said, the biasness, even though you're doing systematically, you still will come up with things which are relevant to your study. As I told you, the level of evidence, because the study design, the number of patients, that thing, how applicable that finding, even though you've grouped it all together, how applicable and it is to your study, whether it's actually going to make any change, or is it still a question mark, or whether it's telling something which is you cannot actually do anything to change practice. Okay, and then a lot of other things, economical factors and implication on this. So you have to make things which are still limiting, things which are still could be biased, and so forth. Okay. So remember, I told you for systematic review, the checklist is PRISMA, the PRISMA checklist. Okay, and this is how it looks like. And similarly, most of the checklists will do this. So it's normally cross-checked against a paper. And this is why I'm saying you can use it for your journal appraisal, because it's, of course, you're just given an abstract, but it's a good way for you to practice when you're seeing a whole paper, and also a good way to use these checklists when you are screening through papers. Okay. So you look at all of these things. So as you can see, one of the things is looking at the eligibility criteria, which is the inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then the bias. And you start to actually score each of the studies. Okay, so this is an example of the checklist, and as you can see, it's a decent 1 to 1.5 pages long. All right. And in fact, most of these questions can be answered just with the abstract, but when it's not there, that's when you go into the detail of the other bits to actually answer the questions. Okay. Once it's done, a consort diagram. So this, in all systematic review, it's important to have a consort diagram. Okay. And in fact, you will have consort diagrams you will have some sort of diagram in all of your flow diagram in any of your studies, because it's important to know how you recruited your patients, how you excluded them, what was the numbers you ended up with, and so forth. Okay, so this is just an example exactly from the website. As you can see, that's why this is their template given. Of course, some people will modify a little bit to fit their study, but it shouldn't be overly modified to the point where then it's not acceptable by the journal. Okay. Now, moving a little bit into an example. So that paper which I told you about, I'm just showing you examples. So remember I told you our consort diagram ended up looking like this with the numbers and records. And it was acceptable. The journal was okay with it. We ended up with 16, even though we started with a search which a large number. At the end, we only ended up actually only including 16 papers. I'm not listing all 16 here. Remember, I told you summarize. Did you see that Excel which I showed you? It was all like chunky, right, with information, but at the end, it's very simplified into very, very short points. Okay. There's more data this way, but I'm just showing you a snapshot of it. Okay, so LIC is basically low income countries, and HIC is high income countries. So we were looking at that in terms of burn and grafting and so forth. This is also from that paper, looking at, it's a bit busy, but it's on purpose because I don't really want you to focus on this. This is just giving you an example of how it will look at the end. The figure here is basically for the low income, okay? And this is for the high income. And this particular one looks at early and late in terms of length of stay, all right? And this is a picture of the forest plot with the data of each paper. And this can be built. I'll come to the softwares which can do this in a while. But basically, why I wanted this more so for y'all to do it as a publication is not the idea, because you might get something like this for your Viva boots in the future. So that's why I decided to paste this to explain it that way. So in this case, the results which were pulled, all papers were able to have the mean and standard deviation, and it was taken in their numbers. Okay, so those things were extracted from this paper and vice versa. Okay, and then it pulls the total numbers here. And then what it does is it also ends up giving you whether at the end, by pulling all the data, whether it's significant. And you can see very clearly in this image, all of it ended up favoring early, obviously. Okay, and obviously some were borderline, but most of them fell on this side. This is the pool data of all the studies put together. Same with in this chart, if you see, there was a study which did not favor late compared to early, but this is only 3 papers which were in that. And when it's pulled together, it was not significant, but you can see a trend that it seems to be, but this could also be because there is less papers which are studied between early and late in high income countries. There has been a bit more papers out there. But post that, we realized that probably more things need to be studied in this area in the long run, but at least it kind of already show where things are. Key things, 95% interval, the mean difference, all of those things are things which you would look at. But the conclusion you'll make from this is that it was statistically significant in low-income countries when you actually try, it favors early. So that was the conclusion made. So how can you build this diagram? Okay, so you will end up, so as much as the most favorite software which people normally do meta-analysis on is the next one which I'm going to show you. You can actually do it using Excel. So this is just me searching on Excel. I did watch some of the videos. I could play one video for you as an example, but you can actually do that forest plot. So when I say the forest plot, I'm not talking about this bit of the information. This thing can be drawn using Excel. Obviously, to get the rest of the numbers and pulling the data together, you might need to do other formulas in Excel to do so. But to do this image, you can use Excel, and it will probably also do that pulling of data, but it probably needs a lot of input. The other software, SPSS, now actually the more latest SPSS actually allows you to do meta-analysis before it doesn't. It even does the funnel plot. It also does the forest plot. And in fact, so you can use SPSS to actually do your meta-analysis for you. Okay, and this is something which started since I think late 2022 or so, when the software started incorporating this ability. Previously, the one which was famous in doing this, in fact, the diagram which I'm showing you was done using RefMan. So RefMan was the one of the original softwares which people used. Obviously, people like using something called R and stuff like that, but that needs more like the MS-DOS style programming. Even I don't use it. Okay, so this was the original software which was used to actually do the forest plot. And this one, obviously, the benefit is if you actually get it, I don't think it's free. There's probably a trial period and so forth, but we can talk, you could talk with a librarian and see if there's any way of getting it if you end up needing to use it. This may not be most of you who are attending this talk today, but there is some cost to this software compared to obviously Excel, which you can have, you can use from the home-based computers. Okay, so these are the softwares which can create that forest plot for you. Okay, now just to kind of summarize before I start a little bit of discussion with y'all is just to say, so you'll start off with your protocol, you're like what you're actually going to do, which was the talk by Prof. Myravan. And also as he mentioned, you need a very specific question, and that's why it's been said many times, what is your question, what is your question? Then you need to develop your performer and also how you're going to collect, that's your inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, and then your search strategy, like what database are you going to use, PubMed and Web of Science, are you going to use PubMed? You can use Google Scholar, but it's very tricky because it's not one which is easily where you can exclude things very easily, and you might have to do most of it manually. Okay. And we don't encourage that much. But having said that, it does include a lot of references outside just published papers, and especially if it's more for your thesis, you might find it that you want to use it. Okay. Then in terms of your search strategy, keywords, the key thing is to list down very clear keywords from your title and research question, and the keywords can go on very long. I really hope in the next session you can do that with Vanita. We will do a little bit at the end of this, just as an example, but I'm not going to go into you finishing till the end about it. Okay, and then you actually do the search, okay, using those keywords, and you start to, as I already said, appraise each paper, see whether you want to include it or not. If you're going to include it, what is it, the key messages from each paper, okay? And then you start making sense of the results, and you writing a thesis or writing it to publish, up to you, okay? So I'm going to end it here first. And before we move into keywords, I wanted to ask maybe in the chat box, so then that way you don't feel that you have to unmute to talk and stuff like that. In the chat box, maybe you can list your topic and your keywords. I'll give you all 5 minutes to do that, and then I'll use that as a point of discussion on a little bit of feedback on whether you're going in the right direction or not, and so forth. How about that? Okay, so I think best that each of you, well, I suggest all of you should try it, not just 1 or 2 of you. List your proposed title and what you think your keywords are. Just try it out. There's no wrong listing. It's just so that you can troubleshoot a little bit now, and then that will kind of help you to fill your worksheets post this talk. So if everyone here is from, and also can you mention whether you're GS, NS, or PETS, please? PETS surgery, please. Yeah, PS. I probably will know it from your topic, but I think some of your GS people still do topics in neurosurgery and PETS surgery. Prof. Shireen, you want to add anything while they fill up the comment box? Anything?
No, yeah, sorry, I was looking for my unmute button.
Yeah, that happens to me too.
Wait, yeah, I actually, it's one of those topics that's actually quite complex. But actually, if you drill down to just the principles of systematic review, it's actually very easy to grasp. Using just like 5 basic concepts, right? How do you approach a problem? What are the questions you want to answer about a problem? And compare what other people have reported about the problem, right?
Right.
The statistical analysis can seem very daunting and overwhelming, but that's okay, because you can always ask the statistician to help you with that.
Right.
I think more importantly is it a question that you want to answer for your own practice in terms of comparing what is out there, in terms of what other people have reported, so that you're not kind of redoing the studies that they've already done before.
Yeah, that's the main thing. You don't want to be repeating already well-established answers to a question which you think is not answered. Yeah.
And I noticed you also said that actually it's allowable, right? As
Yes.
the masters.
Masters, yes. Especially the ones which are going by published paper format. Yeah.
And it's actually a great way. Yeah. It's a great way to know your topic very well, especially your core topics in the clinical master's program that you're in yourself. Because you read across so many papers, and you because of that, other people have actually done the work for you. All you're gathering is actually consolidating everything together. And especially for those of you, I don't know how many here are maybe nearing third year or final year, and if you're desperate because you can't recruit fast enough, you don't have enough patience to recruit for your RCT or whatever, this is actually a very, very good study design to complete your thesis.
Sorry, Prof, can you repeat again the 5 things, which is the first is questions, and then the second is the question background, is it? The third one is comparison, and 4 is statistical analysis. I just don't get the number 2.
Oh, well, Ida, you were listening. Very good, like you. Sometimes you wonder who is listening. Okay, yeah. So 4th one was your statistical analysis, yeah, and 5 is reporting your results, lah. Yeah. Oh, what is that? Ida, what did you put? Prevalence of BPH patient.
Yeah, just a simple topic.
So her keywords are the hats
It's
Anxiety.
basically hospital anxiety and depression scoring on BPH patient lah, benign prostatic hyperplasia. So the keywords would be BPH. First is the head score itself, and then anxiety, depressions, or mental illness, and then the keyword for the benign prostate hyperplasia lah. It could be benign prostate enlargement, or benign prostate hyperplasia, or benign prostate hypertrophy.
Which yeah, so those are your starting keywords. Now actually thank you for putting that, so we can use this as an example to how to expand your keywords. So one thing, obviously nowadays they have things called match terms, and they will, if you put this, it will come with other ways which it said. But I find sometimes when you use the match terms, it still does not capture all the papers, and I still like breaking it up into different forms myself and searching it just in case. So what other things besides anxiety would describe that keyword? And do you think in terms of the word patient, do you want to be more specific in other ways you would call patients? Maybe you want to search. Yeah. And head score, like maybe you also want to put it in the full form. And then you would also want to, because you obviously want to eliminate other kind of scoring system, but for your literature search, would you want to also consider other kinds of way people look at anxiety and depression? So wouldn't you want to have that information as well? Yeah.
Yeah, so how do we, I mean, it's just so would it be just depression scoring, or
so don't
anxiety?
put the word score. So if you put hats, sometimes when you put hats, the reason, remember how I mentioned that you might limit the search, it might miss out some papers. Yes, it's good, it's being specific. It's a good way to search it first, but BPH and hats, or BPE and hats, or and those kind of things, when you do your N and O, but it might miss out some things which might still be useful for your reading. So you want to expand things. So, and here you say anxiety. You're only looking at anxiety. You're not going to look at depression, because you're using hats, but D is depression, right? So wouldn't you want to also have the word depression as one of your keywords? Obviously, when you put mental illness, will cover everything and will include depression, but other ways to list your keywords and expand on it is to look at what you've listed and see other ways it can be searched, or other ways people call it. More after these keywords, anything else which you think? So what is your research question? It is to look at the prevalence?
Yeah, look at the prevalence. But I don't know if it is under systematic review. It could be under.
No. So you're not doing, so even though I'm doing the talk for systematic review, it is for you to search things systematically. The idea here of this talk, it's not only just for those who want to do systematic review and publish it, but it's the method which you are learning, like how to search for papers using a database which you're comfortable with. And so how to list your keywords so that you get all the papers which are needed. Okay, and that could be that you might only want to look papers in the last 10 years because you want what is the current work which is done in the area, or you might not limit the year. Okay, so those are the things you would want to see. In terms of literature review, keep in mind, for your thesis, you're not only writing up as literature review, you will actually cover the background of BPH. So you want background of pathophysiology of BPH. You want to cover like what is the implication of mental illness in this. So when you want to write those paragraphs up, you need information to write those sections up, right? So you will then end up expanding your keywords because you want to make sure you have enough reference paper to write your sections in the chapter 2 of your thesis. So that's where this is useful. And that's why you should practice searching it systematically so that you will then group it into folders. This is for everyone. Group it into folders according to papers which are to do with the disease. You might even break it up in if it's disease, whether it's pathophysiology, whether it's pathology, whether it is to do with epidemiology. Okay, so up to you all. And then how you group, how you categorize your papers of search into the little folders. Then the same thing which comes to with other things. So BPH and mental illness. Or what about one of y'all? Give me some other disease which you're dealing with, or what you're proposing to do. Anyone doing qualitative studies like giving out questionnaires and surveys? Hi guys. Come on. You can type. You don't have to unmute and talk. You can type as well. Give me one other title or something, some keywords you can think of. No? Only Ida wants to participate. Come on, guys, try. This is your chance to think of keywords and so forth for your study. Ida can always disturb me afterwards. No? No one wants to try?
Have to select lah. Sorry.
Have to select, is it?
Yeah.
All right, okay, I'll pick someone. All right, what about, okay, yeah, Nicholas, what about you? Can you tell me what your proposed topic of interest is, or what you're hoping to do as a project? Are you there, Nicholas? You can type, but please reply to my question. Are you there? Nicholas Wong? No? All right, we'll go to the next one. Atika? Guys.
Hi, Prof.
Okay. Yes. Hi.
My proposed topic
Okay.
is actually on happiness and wellness among pediatric surgeons in Malaysia. So I'm proposing to do a questionnaire to survey the happiness level using two questionnaires, which is one is the assessing the happiness level, and the second one is to assess their burnout, perceived support, and those levels.
Yeah. Okay, so all right, we'll do Atika's one first, and then Chris will do yours. Okay, so with Atika's one, so you'll have a keyword which will be burnout, right? And then happiness, but the happiness has to be clear in what you will have to have something to go among who. Okay, and then what else will be keywords? So you're doing survey, you won't use that as a keyword. Other keywords which you will have would be maybe work-life balance. Okay, among, again, you might want to say later, you want to probably say among who. Okay, and then since you said there are questionnaires which are already set, you might want to use those as keywords already. Just like how you saw Ida had her questionnaire, which was hats, as one of her keywords. So those questionnaires which you're using, you want to put it as keywords, but that's just so that you get other studies which have used it already. It's actually especially useful when you're trying to justify why you're using that questionnaire. Okay, and so forth. So yeah. So can you see I've given you a few keywords. You probably can expand it out more in terms of among pediatric surgeons. So yeah, so you want to actually put that out there. But having said that, you might put that as a keyword first, and when you want to search it, but you might not want to restrict it to ped surgeons, because you might want to find papers where they have done this same survey among other surgeons. Okay, maybe you don't want to expand it to medicine, maybe, but you want to see it among other surgeons, because those papers will kind of give you guidelines on how to improve your study design. Okay, so you are not only sometimes searching to write up your chapter, you're also searching to find ways on improving your, especially in the early stages, you're trying to find enough papers to make sure that what you have as a protocol and how you're executing things are in check. So that's why I'm saying you might not restrict it to, so you might just say surgeons rather than, and then again, you might want to then later break it up, whether it's among trainees or just everyone as well. So because different levels will have different kind of concerns when it comes to those happiness level and burnout, and a lot of different factors might affect happiness and burnout from not just from workplace. There is also things to do with family issues and so forth. And in fact, I think one of the keywords you would probably bring into this thing would be to do with discrimination, harassment, and so forth as well. Okay, so that's a little bit of direction for you. Before we wrap up, we've got 4 minutes left, but I think I'll end in 5 minutes from now. I mean, not 5 minutes, from 10 minutes from now, is the one which was put here, telemedicine questionnaire and validation. So the keywords are telemedicine, questionnaire, and validation study. I probably won't put questionnaire as a keyword. You probably want to be a bit more specific on what do you mean by questionnaire. Telemedicine, yes, but that's a broad keyword. One thing which you want to put part of your keyword is, this is useful when you want to search for papers which are exact, whether not exact, but to see roughly how many papers have already looked at this. But if you want to actually do it to improve it for your different sections of justification, you might end up looking at, so validation study, maybe not yet. So what other things, what is your purpose of doing this? Telemedicine questionnaire validation. You're validating an already existing questionnaire, I believe, which is used somewhere else but not used in Malaysia. Is that what you're planning to do, Chris? Are you there? You can type if you can't talk. Is it because you are, it's your purpose to validate telemedicine questionnaire, which is being already used in another, already used and validated somewhere else, and then you want to validate it here to use it in Malaysia? Or is that yes or no? Or you can say don't know. What I would give you as a direction for that though is to find out those things, whether your aim is to validate or your aim is to use one which is already validated. Okay, find that out first. Then if it's one to use one which is validated, then your search of your keywords will more to do with like your, what group you are dealing with and why. Like are you going to look at costing? Are you going to look at infrastructure? Or are you going to look at people who are using telemedicine, their how satisfied they are? Or people who using could be the patient on the side, or the people who are actually doing it, which is the doctors on the side, their opinions on it. So there are a lot of things. So which is it? Okay, so all of those questions were asked is something for you to go and think about, because based on that only you can start then coming up with more keywords. Okay. All right. Okay, before we wrap up, I'm open to answering any questions before we end. Oh, he left us, that's why. Okay, so
sorry, Prof.
Okay.
It's a validation questionnaire on an existing, I mean, it's a validation study based on an existing questionnaire. It's a telemedicine usability questionnaire, but we want to translate it from English to Malay and then validate it in Malay.
Okay, so your aim is to validate it then, to translate and validate. Okay,
Yes.
so then what you would be, your keywords would then be, okay, so your keywords, as I said, you're looking for papers to support your method. Literature review supports your method. So yes, you can look for papers which show you how to, what are the steps involved to translate, validate. So you need references for that bit to justify your methods. You also need, So when you say questionnaire, that's a bit broad. You might want to be specific. Is it questionnaire? Which questionnaire? What is the exit? Like how Ida had this now. She has put hats. Obviously, there might be more than one. So maybe you want to be specific, list down all the different existing questionnaires which are out there and search all of it first. Because I'm not sure, have you decided which one you want to use? If you haven't, then you search all the different ones which are out there. If you've already decided what you have to use, I still suggest you search all the ones which are out there, because you will still need to explain later, justify why you're using this questionnaire over that, why you want to translate this one, why not the other one. So you need to search it. Okay, if you just put questionnaire, a lot of things will come up. So you have to be specific ones which are related to telemedicine. Okay, and then telemedicine. So since your study is going to be validation and this, you probably won't want to answer the other bits, but you can always kind of look for history of telemedicine, because that is a section which you might put into your literature review, like how it all started and all of that. So you might want to search papers related to the when it started and all of those things, because that is something to write in literature review, right? How it all began, when was the first time this started, and how it was established, where it was established, and so forth. Okay, all right, thank you. I didn't know that you had connectivity issues, so I'm sorry I was talking.
Sorry, sir.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, so anyone else, any questions for me? If not, I'm gonna also ask, is Prof. Shireen still around, or she's left? She's here. I might ask her.
I'm around, but
add one
need
or
to
two
leave.
things. Okay, do you have any final words, Prof. Shireen? Because we'll end in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, no. Sorry, thanks very much, Gary.
Thank you. All right, so guys, any question for me? You can send your questions by email. I'll try and address it. But also, so that's the other thing. I'm sure all of you received the email from Nadia with the checklist given by Renita. I really, really suggest that you look at that, because that actually outlines a little kind of checklist for you to follow when you're searching for things. And if you fill it up ahead, it's going to be useful for when you if you're joining her session, which is the hands-on, but it's online. If you've already filled it up, it'll make that discussion with her easier. So I really think you should fill it up. I will join because I'm moderating all the sessions, so I'll be there as well. So I'll have I'll give my how do I say, my problems and so forth with certain things. So I'll give my pointers as well, but mainly it's going to be led by Renita. I'm not going to be talking so much, but I really, really think you should use that. I think it's a useful data sheet to fill up, regardless of what extent you're going to use it for, but it's a good starting point. Okay. Otherwise, there will be another talk late in the year specifically for journal appraisal. So, and I think Prof. Byron is doing that, and he will be focusing. That one is focusing mainly on how similar to what he does in the master class for getting people ready for exams. But yeah, it is a good talk to attend as well. So that's much later in the year though. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Okay, no. If not, thank you. Thank you all for attending. We have one next week. No, when's the next one? In 2 weeks' time, I think. February 20th, right, Nadia?
Yes, Prof.
Yeah. Okay, so it'll be the next one is Feb 20th. All right. There's none next week. Thank you.